All right, we will get started. I did not think there was going to be this many people here. So fantastic. We're going to meet our panelists in a minute. I think all of whom resent that I called this the boring stuff because you're going to hear it. It is anything but boring. Welcome. Anybody, it's your first time here to the EC? Awesome. Welcome. Anybody here who's an entrepreneur? Hey, welcome home. Look, my name is Sam Davidson. I'm the CEO here at the Nashville Entrepreneur Center, and we're glad you're here. We do this once a month, and so this is our monthly panel, our Lunch and Learn. Hope you guys have enjoyed the food today. You're going to enjoy the content. I know that. Speaking of the food, I want to introduce Gina real quick. Gina's going to stand up, tell us a little bit more about her business, but she cooked all this. So Gina, there we go. That's right. Tell us more about yourself, your business, and what we're eating today.
All right, well, it's an honor to cook for everyone. I hope you enjoyed lunch. My name is Gina Cecilia. I'm the founder of Gina's Italian Cuisine. And just a little background, I'm a musician turned food entrepreneur. I launched my business in 2021 during the pandemic as my little side hustle turned second career. And I've kind of dabbled into different areas of food business, obviously catering, pop-ups, events, merging music with food. And I finally decided now I'm on a mission of launching my keto-friendly Italian food products. So my keto-friendly tomato sauce is currently being manufactured. It's coming out next week. And I'm also working on my keto-friendly grab-and-go entrees. And speaking of which, I have just started selling in the cafe. So any day you can go in there, whether you're a visitor or a member, and grab lunch, pay with the QR code when you pick up, and enjoy. Pop it in the microwave or take them home. So grab a card before you go. Gina's Italian Cuisine, stay in touch. And always appreciate feedback and hope you enjoy it. And eat everything, it all has to go.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you again, Gina. And go to the buffet as much as you like while we're having our chat. So it's fantastic. A couple folks we want to thank before we introduce our panelists. So first and foremost, Dell. They are our community partner. So they help us bring all these events to you every single month. Here's a little bit more about what they do.
Sponsor of the Nashville Entrepreneur Center. Dell for Startups is a program from Dell Technologies that helps entrepreneurs launch, grow, and scale their startups by providing resources, tech expertise, and scalable technology solutions. Some of the key benefits include a dedicated technology advisor who is local to Nashville, discounts and promotions on select Dell products and services, and access to our vast portfolio of products. For any questions on how to access these benefits, visit dell.com/startups or contact your dedicated Dell for Startups point of contact. Dell for Startups is a
Great. We also want to thank our growth partners. So Pinnacle, CLA, and RJ Young. These are folks who have specific industry expertise that support the work that we do here, which is the work that we do is supporting you. So if anybody in attendance today has questions about banking, about accounting, about technology, these are folks who are in your corner. And so let us know. You can let Lauren know. You can let Trey know. We'll be happy to connect you with professionals there to get those answers. So a big thanks to our partners as well. Also, we'd like to mention our partnership with Launch TN. So Launch Tennessee right now has a regional seed fund called Invest TN. This QR code will take you there for more information. If you have a business and you think you want to raise capital, you think you need to raise capital, Invest TN is a fund that has been set up as a product of the state of Tennessee to invest and help grow startups. So there's a lot of requirements, of course, you got to meet. There's a lot of things to consider, but it is an opportunity that's available through the state, which is awesome. So we like to promote that. You can reach out to myself. You can reach out to Haley Zapolsky, who's our capital connector, if you have further questions about this program. But the state is making investments in startups that are in Tennessee. They made about 8 of those across the state so far. So it is happening, it is working, and this is the place you can go to apply and find more information. So be sure to visit that. And now let's talk to our folks. So Megan, Michael, Brian, and Josh, you guys come up here. And while they're coming up here, I'll tell a little bit more about this idea. So once a month, on the second Thursday of every month, we do a panel, a lunch and learn panel, a Q&A, like you're going to see here. Different topic every month, but we want the chance to hear from experts where I'll ask a couple of questions, but you'll ask some questions too. We talk a lot about raising money here at the EC. We talk a lot about sales. We talk a lot about launching, about going to market, about a lot of stuff that sounds really cool and fun and exciting. But a lot of times companies do that. They take those steps, but they skipped some other ones. And so we have programming here, we have workshops here, we have mentors here. I want to make sure you don't skip some of those vital steps, even though it may not be as headline grabbing, attention getting, as sexy as some of the other things that come to mind when we think entrepreneurship. So we wanted to give space for that, especially as tax deadlines loom, as we're here almost about to wrap the first quarter, as you might have big plans this year. Here are 4 areas that we don't want you to overlook. So we've got panelists in that space. I'm going to have them introduce themselves, their area of expertise, kind of what they do on a day-to-day basis. Let's just go down the row, and then I'll ask my first question. So Josh, we'll start with you.
Hi, Josh Clark, and I used to steal cars. No, that's true, but I'm trying to start us off strong in that insurance is not boring. So I'm a area vice president and broker based here in Nashville for Gallagher, property and casualty insurance with some other fun to me type of insurance products that I work on a daily basis.
Good afternoon, Megan O'Rourke. I am a financial consultant. I have a very boring corporate job, which to me is not boring, but I created a fun outside business activity that is approved to help entrepreneurs, especially when it comes to a holistic view on financial consulting and business strategy planning.
Hey, everybody. I'm Michael Wolf. I'm the founder of Boone Legal. Before I got into the law, I worked in technology in the entertainment space. I made video games. I made films for about 20 years. And then I got into this because it's clearly just as exciting.
Good afternoon. Brian Evans with Adams Keegan. We are an HR payroll benefits company. I work with entrepreneurs across Nashville, really across the country. Adams Keegan's been around for 37 years. I opened our Nashville office about 7 years ago.
Fantastic. Okay, so we know what you do. We got your areas of expertise up here on the screen. I almost titled this session, How to Stay Out of Jail. So with that in mind, tell us in your particular area of expertise, the one of the things that if I'm starting a business, why I need to think about, spend time on, find the expert to help me understand your area. So maybe I stay out of jail, or maybe I just avoid something really, really expensive later on. So tell us why I should think about that while I'm also thinking about the name of my business, my logo, my website, who I want to, all this kind of stuff.
I'll kick us off. I brought a example as to, I think, the best way I can show this. So this is an insurance policy, a real insurance policy from 1870 something. This is one page. When you think about where we started, this is how we started in the insurance and risk management world. And they said, we need to change something to an insurance policy, i.e. an addendum or an endorsement. They literally stuck it on to the policy, right? That's an endorsement. I don't want to pick on my colleagues up here, but over the last 200 years, this is a very small version of a policy today, right? It's a little heavier. So in my world, it really, it is ever changing, and to stay out of jail, there's a lot of ways to stay out of jail. But from a business owner's perspective, it's making sure that you're paying attention to what that is protecting you from, right? And having an expert, someone who works in it daily, that can help decipher that for you and how it correlates to your business. Because it's not a matter of if you will be sued or a claim will be filed against you. It's a matter of when. And you want to have that risk transferred. If you don't, you stand on your own. So, and in this ever-evolving world, from an insurance and a litigation standpoint, there is a lot of risk to any and every business owner. We could spend a whole session talking about that. But if there's any way that I can kind of portray the importance of understanding how you transfer that risk of hopefully staying out of jail in your businesses, this is a great way to do so. But it is not as simple as it once was.
And hopefully jail, like that's a marketing term, how to stay out of jail. I hope you realize that. Like hopefully you do lots of other things to stay out of jail. But with that in mind, let's hop legal real quick. So similarly, like I'm getting started, I've got things set up. Yeah. I got to get an LLC. I may want to protect some things, but why again from the very beginning, or why is there something I should think about quarterly or a check-in, or at least to have an attorney in my corner?
Well, let me start, Sam, with this question. Just as a show of hands, who made a transaction today? Okay, I see a couple hands. I want you to think about this broader. Who bought a cup of coffee, went to a gas station, grocery store, dropped off your kids at school? Come on, show of hands. Who has completed a transaction today? All right. I'm going to guess that the half or so of you that raised your hands are just the brave ones, because we transact things every day. We make a contract with other people on a regular basis. And what everybody up here is going to talk about are, things like these documents. They're all contracts, right? Everything that we do when we transact any sort of communication with another person, do any sort of things, whether it's business transactions or personal transactions, they're essentially all contracts, right? I agree to do something for you, you agree to do something for me, we both go ahead and do that. The basic stuff. So if you're looking at that and going, okay, I know that every one of these transactions is a contract, and some of them, like that one, are a whole lot. That's where we tend to go towards the attorneys. But how many here have applied for, registered your own LLC or corporation? That's a lot of hands. Keep your hands up for a minute. Did you complete any post-formation paperwork? If you did, leave your hand up. Okay. And of that post-formation paperwork, if you did anything more than just bylaws, keep your hand up. Okay, so that's 2, maybe 3 people. And that's the thing is we have gotten caught up in this situation now where we think about doing everything in an automated basis. And I can really appreciate that coming from a tech background, why that makes things simpler sometimes. But any of those services that do that are not providing legal advice. They're providing you a form that you have to fill out. And it doesn't make anybody feel more confident in moving forward with their business when they're looking at stuff, not really sure what it is, or copying things from what they find from their competitors. That's not a really confident way to move forward. So when you talk about why to do things like get involved with an attorney early, it's because if you're like me, when you first started doing this stuff, you made a lot of mistakes by doing it on your own because you're sitting there going, oh crap, how much is this going to cost me? And that's the biggest thing. And the answer to that question is it's going to cost you a lot more to clean it up than to do it right in the first place. And that's sometimes that thing as an entrepreneur that we have to balance.
So speaking of how much is it going to cost me, let's talk money real quick. So especially at setup, we want to make money. We want to sell stuff. That's great. Things cost money. We know that going into it. But why do I want to think deeply about how my finances are organized? Do I have the right platform? Can I just keep this in a spreadsheet, put receipts in a shoebox? I got other things I gotta work on. Why from the get-go are understanding and thinking through my finances, my financial model important?
That goes perfectly into what I was going to say next, actually, is I always say, don't go broke being cheap. You, as the entrepreneur, are a creative, and that's wonderful and great. We need creatives, but also you need help. Do not try to do it all on your own. And especially the number one reason why I see business owners fail is cash flow issues. And so having a holistic view of what's going on in the business, being very tightly connected to your finances is going to better let your business flourish. You're going to give your business a much more positive energy because you know the trajectory of where finances are, how finances are being allocated in your business. And sometimes it's very easy to do, but you just need that person to get you going. So that's kind of what I do and consult you. My goal is for you not to need somebody like me forever. My goal is to help you become your own personal CFO, because I firmly believe that everybody has the capabilities of understanding the finances. We just need them a little bit more in layman's terms. So I'm very passionate about kind of taking that crazy jargon, which they use to just be able to charge you a lot of money and You don't need all the securities licenses to run your own finances. So I'm very, very passionate about you guys understanding the bottom line, having somebody like myself or a financial professional getting things set up for you, and then kind of letting you go, having that understanding and being able to run your own finances. It's so empowering for me to watch and for you to experience.
And one thing I may need money for, when I understand my money for, is when I need to bring other people on board. So whether it's day 1 or day 100, when I think I'm ready to hire somebody, why doing it deliberately or working with an expert versus like, oh, my buddy, he's got some time, or my mom, she's retired, she can come work for me. Why do we want to think through this, plan it out, and go through a process?
Well, yeah, so I'm going to call and raise legal and say, not only when you start a business and you decide to hire someone or multiple people, family, related, not related, you're now susceptible to laws and rules that you never really agreed to. But if you want to operate, you got to do those things. So, for example, entrepreneurs see it all the time. They have employees, they don't have work comp coverage, right? You didn't agree to, but it's like if you're going to employ someone in the state of Tennessee, you got to have work comp. I've got a client hired someone in New York, called me, said, hey, I'm hiring somebody in New York. Okay, guess what? You got to have work comp, but you also have to have, state of New York makes you have disability insurance. 2 things that you never agreed to that you've got to do as an operator in the state. So as you hire people, you're now susceptible to all sorts of additional laws and rules that you've got to obey and follow. The classic entrepreneur mistake that I see often is, oh no, it's these 4, we're all friends, we're all buddies, we all get along. I would tell you as an entrepreneur, from day one, think about what you're doing, where you're going. Is your plan and strategy, is it scalable? And do you have the policies and a handbook? That is essentially your constitution for a business. If we're talking about staying out of jail, the biggest thing I see is I'm only 8 employees. What could happen to me? It takes 1 employee being disgruntled to make a phone call, tie you up in something where your intentions were pure and good, but for some reason they didn't see it that way, and you've got you're now having to call legal because you've got a whole mess on your hands. So my advice to entrepreneurs is always find a good partner to help you think through this stuff. What are your policies and procedures? You're the doers, but there's a lot of stuff operationally that I tell you, I always find a good partner on these areas, because they can quickly help you get to the other side of this is what you need to do. Ultimately, it's your choice whether you do it or not, but in terms of being compliant, that's the best advice I can give an entrepreneur.
I've got one more question for each of them, but you all be thinking about your questions because we want to obviously give a lot of space for that. So I hear what you're saying, and Brian, we'll start with you and come back down this way. I hear what you're saying about we want to think about it on the beginning before I actually maybe make the offer, or even maybe start the search process. I don't know. But again, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm trying to move fast. I got this idea. I got this opportunity. I mean, how much time do I need to spend? How much effort? How much consideration? I'm at the idea stage. I'm ready to launch. I'm ready to go. And so again, the same question to all of you, but is there a point at which I really want to sit down and think about this? Is there a point at which I call one of you to help me with this? Is there a point? Tell me about when in the startup process do I need to think about each of your areas?
I mean, I would tell you as early, if you're right now, you've got an idea and you're kind of testing the market and you don't have any employees, you don't really have to talk to me right now. But as soon as you engage, I need to hire people. It's worth having a conversation. I have coffees all the time. You're welcome to reach out to me saying, hey, this is what I'm doing. In 30 minutes, I can give you, these are things you need to be thinking about, right? And you might not have to deal with it today, but just understanding what those things are, and how I can tell you what your options are, right? I mean, how you want to structure things, not legally, but just operationally, how can you be as efficient as possible and compliant as possible? There's a lot of information online. What I say about the internet is there's a ton of information out there, but it's going to take you a lot of time to sort through all of the stuff. And then now you're in the state of Tennessee, the laws are different. So I would tell you, employee 1, certainly if you're at 5 employees, you need to have an employee handbook. You need to have policies and procedures in place at minimum. And then, benefits, all that can come later. But there's certainly kind of a stepping stones that I tell entrepreneurs you need to go through and have them figured out.
I'm going to go with slightly different than I think you may hear from the other folks, because my rule of thumb is you need somebody on the legal side in your corner that you can speak to regularly from day one. Now, if you go to most law firms, you're going to find that that's going to be exceedingly expensive. And so you need to find the right partner for you, because the number one thing that early entrepreneurs have are questions. And the earlier you can ask those questions and get real answers, the better off you are, because you may not need to do everything today, but you don't want to develop yourself into a corner where all of a sudden you find out 2 years from now when you're ready to launch that you have to redo everything, or you have to redo something that's so fundamental you essentially have to tear everything down and rebuild it. Now, that goes on, I think, all of our fronts, but when it comes to legal side, there's so much there, and I think you sort of hear the repeat pattern. There's so much there that is if not treacherous territory, it's certainly, you want to tiptoe through it a little bit, like, so you're not stepping on any mines there. But finding a partner that you can ask a question to and get an actual answer is the important part. The difficulty in the law, of course, is that we're not allowed, under the rules that we're under from the folks that came before us, we're not allowed to answer questions if somebody's not an engaged client. So if you're going to, have the money set aside to pay a $5,000 retainer to some lawyer somewhere so that you can have your questions answered, that's one way to go. There are other options, though.
I would say from day one, because it's not only your business financial planning, but it's your personal financial planning, and it's all encompassing. This is your livelihood. This is the most important thing. So I really like to start from day one, which I can say none of my clients that I currently have, we started from day one. It was a lot of backtracking, but it's okay. We get them on their back on their feet. But I really like to start out with trust planning. I'm a really big advocate for having a revocable trust own your business. For so many components to include, it avoids probate, it automatically includes an estate plan, unlike a will, where a will you have to go through probate. If you're looking to build wealth, let's protect that wealth, let's protect that business, even before you have a dollar in your account. So I really am a big advocate for doing a trust and then a holding company that then owns that operating company for which you're going to be operating that company through. Let's protect from day one, because it just takes one person and you could be out of business, a very disgruntled person, and I personally have seen that happen. And then also the other component of day one financial planning is setting up multiple accounts. I love to see clients have an income account that acts as a clearing account that then goes into multiple different accounts. It's the best way to get your business on a good foot with setting aside money for taxes so that we don't even have to think about it. We know that that's already, you can sleep at night knowing that that's already accounted for. And we have another operating checking account. And then we also have a personnel account, and making sure that we know exactly where all of those assets are allocated and how they're funneling in and out of your business. So day one, I'm a big advocate for, not to say that that can't be many years into the business, but just like I always say, the best time to invest is yesterday, the next best time is today. Same thing with financial planning or financial forecasting and planning for your business.
Yeah, so I think the theme is going to continue with me, that day one is it's pretty important to have insurance, whether you're obligated to have it or it just helps you sleep at night. And I think really, to answer your question, as a new business owner, startup, entrepreneur, wanting to run fast is important. And there is what I would call a control continuum in the insurance world. As you're getting started, your insurance is going to be somewhat simplistic. They have what's called a BOP for a mom and pop. That's how I remember it. It's a business owner's policy that is very broad for the most part, still is thick, if not thicker than that contract there. But it is designed for kind of your smaller, low exposure type companies. So hopefully you don't need to spend too much time from an insurance perspective, but that comes with a caveat, is it depends on what type of business you're starting. That old school policy, that thing stuck onto it was actually an exclusion. So every insurance company is trying to make money, and there are certain types of risks they will not insure. Anyone remember COVID? Business income loss, because if COVID affected you or would have affected you, everybody and their brother filed a claim against their insurance, and it was not covered, right? So that's where you talk to these other professionals about, this keeps me up at night. What can I do? If I can't transfer that risk through an insurance policy, what else can I do? So I think depending upon the business in which you're starting and you're in, if it is a unique idea, which hopefully there are a lot of unique ideas in here, it may be new to the insurance world, which is perfectly okay. But that's all the more reason, I think, to maybe spend a little more time than just simply calling State Farm or Nationwide and taking what they give you as gold, because it's a little more important, because what you're building deserves to be protected, and the amount of time you spend needs to be correlated with what it is you're specifically doing. So that's what we do every day as an agent or broker for you, is to look at your business and get you the right coverage. In some cases, that takes a little more conversation than in others.
Sam?
Yeah.
Can I do a plus one here? So, the thing that I'm hearing and sitting listening, and I think, I talk about this often, how many people here feel that entrepreneurship means that you have to take risks? Okay. How many people here feel like they're a risk taker? Okay. So I'm going to suggest the following, is there are three types of risk. There's risk avoiders, right? Risk assessors, and there's risk takers, right? People that like to avoid risk, obviously all of us up here, part of our job is avoiding risk, right? So if I'm an actuary, if I'm insurance, it's about how do we avoid the risk. On the other side, risk takers, those are the guys that jump out of the plane, and they're going to go for that free dive thing. I don't know what they're doing. But those of us who are entrepreneurs, I believe, are really in the risk assessor category. It's not that we're willing to take a risk, but we're not willing to jump out of the plane without at least grabbing a bag and making sure there's a parachute in it. I may not put it on before I jump out, but I'm going to have one. I'm not just going to grab a Hello Kitty backpack. So I think that's the trick here, is to answer maybe the broader question, is you need to, as entrepreneurs, assess the amount of risk for each one of our different areas and determine not if you need it, because you do, but when you need it. Because I think that really becomes the most important point. And I think all of us clearly are saying the same thing, as early as possible, to understand what the journey in front of you is going to look like is very important, because that gives you a chance to be able to go with a little bit of knowledge of what you might expect to have to deal with and when. That's why early is better. But essentially, it's a risk assessment thing for everybody.
And our panel is absolutely going to be up here if you've got questions afterwards. Maybe you've got a question, but you don't want to raise your hand and ask it. I would encourage you, though. I bet somebody else has a question that you're thinking of, too, in this room. So let's turn it over to you all. Who's got a question for any of the panelists about any of their topics? Yeah, we'll start right there in the back.
I think I have a question, and maybe in between legal and insurance. I own rental properties, and I do a little bit of Airbnb. So I've heard many different kind of scenarios as far as like the holding company, and then just like crazy stuff about having a company for every different HR, management, and all that stuff. And then also just having one company and just putting a huge liability policy over it. So what is, I guess, from like an insurance standpoint and a legal standpoint, what is you guys' recommendation as far as how to set that up?
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of, if you can consolidate your insurance, you're going to get more for your dollars, right? Because ultimately, you can have multiple entities within one singular policy as additional named insureds, but you can have a primary singular policy. And the reason I say that is twofold. One, Administratively, it can become very difficult to scale if you start to get into the world of I'm buying more and more properties, I'm having more and more assets, and each one has its own standalone insurance that maybe renews on its own standalone date. Each one has its own claims experience. It becomes a very big headache, and more likely than not, it's going to cost you more in the long term for the same coverage, right? You would have to have some catastrophic claims experience for that to be an ideal strategy. So that would be my advice from an insurance standpoint. And again, there are a lot of scenarios, again, much probably larger companies that have, hundreds of various entities. Apartments are a prime example, where as they grew, they just got a new policy. And then eventually, just as I did earlier this morning, a broker sits across the table from you on a renewal meeting. Life was great back in the days that we were smaller and insurance was affordable. That may no longer be the case, and it becomes a very challenging aspect of your business to have carved those out from an insurance perspective. So consolidate where you can. There's one private equity company, a buddy of mine, who they're in the business of buying businesses. They have a roofing company, they have a paving company, and they have a plumbing company, and all these various different entities they're buying. And they've got a singular policy within their holding company, right? And they were able to achieve some significant premium savings, all the while maintaining the same limits and coverages, and it's a heck of a lot easier to do.
Can I touch on that real quick?
Yeah, please.
I actually have a client doing this. So it's a great question. The way that I've seen it be done and what we actually just set up was the holding company is actually going to hold or be owner of the dwelling itself. So hold the actual home, and then the operating company is going to pay management fees to the holding company. And the only thing the operating company does is actually the inflow of the income from the Airbnbs. So just another strategy for you.
Yeah, I fundamentally agree with both those. I'd have a question because I haven't explored this on the insurance side, but whether or not the separate entities, when they're named insured, whether they can get to the other entities, the other properties. I would expect not, but I don't know how that works on the insurance side.
So typically, as long as there's commonality between the business units, it makes sense to consolidate. So if you're in real estate, Airbnb, and then you go buy a tech company or start a tech company, in that scenario, I could see where it would make sense to separate out because the risks are different. The underwriting and rating of those risks are different. But under the general terms of the policy, if the carrier, the underwriters accept the additional named insureds, they are sharing in that policy in all forms. So
yeah. So real quick then, along the lines of that, if again it's a risk assessment issue. If you have some independent properties that are fully separate from one another that you want held by a holding company on top, it makes a lot of sense because if somebody has an issue at one, then if you're doing things right, they can't get to the assets of the others. So that makes sense, especially as you scale out and grow. But I've also seen occasionally where you'll have, 3 or 4 units in a single holding company as opposed to one for each one. Again, it's all about the risk. And if you've got a long-term lease, somebody renting a house from you, a family renting a house, very different than bachelor parties. Right, so you just want to think about it that way. And again, it's really talking to people like us and sort of mapping it out and figuring out what the best strategy is for you because it's going to be unique for everybody.
yeah, I mean, the final note there is you're spot on. So I had one client that owned restaurants and bars and taverns, and they had one in a particular area of town that had a murder that occurred, and in that scenario, we don't want that one location significantly and negatively impacting the rates for the entire portfolio. So there are scenarios where you want to carve it out. So it's really, I think, having someone analyzing that from a year-to-year basis as to what's going to be the best appropriation of your funds for your insurance program.
So I think you may have answered my question because I have some rental property as well. So it's single-family homes and it's 4 or more units, which goes into the commercial. Right. But I have different companies because this is my theory. Maybe you can tell me. I am spending more money But I feel like if something happens over here, they drop you for everybody else. So that's why I always have multiple companies.
That's a great point. That's getting into the market. So the market in the insurance world is ever changing due to things like social inflation, nuclear verdicts, catastrophic events, convective storms like we get here in Tennessee. And so carriers are becoming more, if this is even a word, persnickety in terms of how they want to look at your risk, right? And so essentially, if you were to approach the market collectively, the market's going to tell you yay or nay. And it's the broker, the agent's job to be able to communicate that to you and direct you in a way that effectively gets you the coverage you need. And you've got to remember, you can separate limits. So you could have a separate limit for one if you needed it from another, if there's concern based on your particular experience, right? Recognizing that that may be a higher cost to you and your business than if you are functionally able to consolidate them. But there are a lot of carriers, especially in the personal lines and small commercial world, that are scared right now. Prior to becoming a broker with Gallagher, I worked for the commissioner here in Tennessee. Every insurance company has to file their rates in forms, coverages, these forms here. In every state, they have to be approved. And there is a constant fight every year as to what these carriers are wanting to and willing to cover. And so there is no easy answer. It's going to be specific to your particular risk, those locations, literally down to how close they are to a fire department. I mean, there's work to be done, especially in the real estate world.
Yeah, you also said at the beginning about how you want to avoid like the beginner mistakes that you just plug forward and then it costs a lot of money to reverse. I was wondering from each of y'all, what are some of the most common and costly mistakes that you see all the time that could have easily been avoided with just a little bit of preparation?
I wouldn't say costly because it's going to be the same cost if whether you start day one or start later, but just the business structure as a whole. Like for instance, I have a real estate professional that has been running everything as a sole proprietor, and so we had to completely like backtrack, and we created the trust, but it would have been the same cost either way. But what I will say, the biggest costly mistakes come down to tax planning. There's a lot of tax deduction strategies out there that require tax planning and not tax preparation. And God bless accountants. I love them. I am not an accountant, but just because you're not an accountant, a CFA, doesn't mean that you don't know tax strategies and you can't plan accordingly. So some of the things that I love to go over with clients is planning out for the Augusta rule, which is that renting, your personal property back to your own business for 14 days. It's a huge tax planning write-off and deduction. We can talk more about that a little bit later, but and then also like setting up retirement plans. That's another huge deduction. And setting up an HSA account. I mean, there's so many big deductions out there that are very costly at the end of the year when you get that. Uncle Sam comes for you, and it can be a huge tax savings if we plan accordingly. So I would say on the financial side, it really dwindles down to the tax component and how much we could be saving on the overall year, especially with hiring your kids. That's a huge, huge tax deduction. So that's kind of one that like we backtrack, especially if you didn't file for an S corp and we didn't do payroll for you. If your business is generating $40,000 or more, big advocate for filing as an S corp status. You can save 15.3% right off the bat off of the basis of the majority of your business income. So those are just a couple of quick hitters right there, but I'm just a big advocate for planning from the get-go because those ones are really hard to come back from.
I just want to jump in on the S corp thing real quick. When you're talking about filing it as an S corp, you're talking about filing with the IRS as an S corp, not creating your business as an S corp. And I think that's important. And I'll come back, but I just think that's important because from a legal standpoint, if you can start as an LLC and remain an LLC as long as possible, both my legal and business mentors have said that, but you, as an LLC, you can always choose the S Corp tax filing. So.
Great point.
I would add on the entrepreneur initial mistakes. There's a story here a couple of years ago. I see entrepreneurs 1099 employees all the time that aren't 1099s. The state wants their tax revenue. So you think, well, what's going to happen? What did I say earlier? It takes one employee to create a headache. Girl graduates from college as a social media director for a startup that was here at one point. He 1099, the owner 1099s her. Tax season comes around. Dad realizes that no taxes have been taken out of her check. She's been showing up for work every day, 8 to 5. She's not a 1099 employee. Well, that father's like, what are you doing? Like, this is illegal. You're going to pay my daughter's taxes because she's not. Like, that's the kind of stuff, like, why I see it with entrepreneurs all the time. They always try to justify they're a 1099, they're a 1099. I'm not telling you they're not a 1099, but if they're only working for you and they're not doing what they're doing for you for anybody else, they're probably not a 1099. So that's a really simple one that I see all the time. And then the question becomes, you're right now, you might be 1099 employees because that prevents you from having to do a lot of extra work, like setting up payroll. The other thing I'll see is entrepreneurs not setting up properly in the states and setting up the tax accounts. If you've got employees, you've got to pay a SUTA tax, setting employee tax. This is stuff that, like, you're trying to grow and get a business off the ground. You don't know anything about this stuff. Find a partner that can help you think through this stuff of what do I need to do to be legal. 1099, what is the work status of your employees, and setting up the proper accounts, getting work at minimum, getting work comp, and getting a SUTA account are two things that you're all going to have to do if you've got employees. You wouldn't believe the number of employers that don't do that. And also know that if you've got employees anybody have employees out of state yet? You're going to hire employees out of state. As soon as you do that, that's a whole nother set of laws and things you got to follow through with, and you've got to set up the work comp in each of the states or make sure your policy is transferring to those states. Those are common things that I see with almost every entrepreneur I talk to.
Yeah, I'll try and be brief. I wasn't kidding when I started out saying I used to steal cars, okay? Trying to get out of this boring comment. We're having a lot of fun here. So the costliest mistakes I would add, again, goes back to those exclusions. In your businesses, there are some uninsurable risks that you just take, right? You can't avoid it. You try. You need to prepare for it. But if you aren't reviewing, if you're just clicking the accept terms and conditions button in the insurance world, there will be exclusions. And we had a scenario where, just so be it, I was in the automotive industry, and our insurance excluded the peril of theft to vehicles. We were car dealerships. Usually when the deal is cheaper, there's a reason, right? And we didn't catch that. So over the course of that policy year, we couldn't get coverage for car theft. So get away from the transaction of insurance. We're stuck. What are we going to do? We're going to train and try and prevent car theft. And so the only way I could test my car dealerships was to go and see if I could steal a car. And so, sure enough, I've stolen about a dozen cars, y'all. It's been, I can tell you how to do that after the panel's over. But the point is, there's no worse feeling, and I've not been a business owner, but I can tell you there's no worse feeling than building something, getting momentum, and then all of a sudden one claim can blow it all up, especially if that one claim could have been covered, but we didn't take the time to ensure that that coverage was appropriately placed. So don't just accept what people are telling you. Do some homework, make sure you fully understand it, even if it's the boring stuff, would be my advice.
And I'll give you real quick, the legal one. Try not to use Google as a legal document repository.
ChatGPT, right? That's what we're doing now?
We're doing ChatGPT now. 3.5, the free one, right? No, I mean, look, when I did the same thing that virtually every entrepreneur I talk to has done, which is when you start off, you do your own contract work because it's cheap. Well, the reality is that as entrepreneurs, we're great technicians. We know what the work is. That part, that's fine. excuse me, but that's not where contracts are generally litigated. Contracts are generally litigated on the boilerplate stuff, the general provisions, miscellanea, what have you. And we do, as entrepreneurs, in our technician jobs, what we tend to do with our business part of our jobs, which is we look at competitors and we look at what's out there and easily available, and we roll with it because we assess the risk and go, well, I'm smart and I can do that. And the problem is that as smart as we are, I mean, I look back at some of the contracts I did before I started practicing, and they're just awful. And I opened myself up to such terrible risk that I didn't know, because I didn't know that what I was doing was as important as it was. And I didn't really understand it. I just copied and pasted it. Well, the reality is most of that stuff that you're taking it from off Google was copied and pasted from somebody else's stuff until you get back to the original. And guess what? That was meant for their work, not for yours. So that's a huge thing. The second big thing is making sure you do your post-formation documentation. I will tell you that we get a lot of folks coming in that said, hey, I set up my own company. I went through, LegalZoom or Rocket Lawyer, whatever platform they went through. And I say, well, can you send me your post-formation documents? And they're like, well, it's in a big binder. And they send me this big binder, and it's a lovely leatherette binder that nothing is filled out in. It's completely useless. And they paid basically what they could have paid us to do the same thing and have the legal support with it. So don't get fooled by that stuff. It's no different than when we used to go to Office Depot or Staples and pull the forms off the shelf.
Big round of applause for our group today. Thank you, guys. Like I said, they're going to stick around. So if you've got questions while you're eating some more food, feel free to ask them anything that you've got going on, things you're curious about. We do events here every week. And so usually on Thursdays, but also some other stuff. So next Thursday, we've got our third Thursday happy hour. So come have a drink with us right behind this wall in the cafe area. We always do a free co-working every month as well. But some other cool stuff. So our Southeast Women in FinTech Breakfast will be in this room on Monday morning. So if you are in FinTech, come check that out. We're going to be talking about debt funding. We do one capital-related event every month. Sometimes it's equity fundraising and venture capital. This one's about debt. And so loans, credit cards, when should you use what? What do you need to know about that? We're going to have bankers up here, lending professionals as well. Our Project FinTech is one of our newest cohorts. We're wrapping our very first one of those on April 3rd. So that'll be a really awesome, fun afternoon to get to meet those 9 companies that we've helped accelerate over the last 9 months or so. And then also another fun series that we do, a breakfast series, the first Thursday of every month. It's Cereal with a Cereal. So we have a cereal buffet, and then I talk to a serial entrepreneur, so somebody who's done this more than once for their lessons learned. And then this panel next month is some creative marketing ideas. So we're not going to talk about social media. We're not talking about paid advertising, but we've got 3 experts in their respective fields who do something else to market their business in some way. So it may give you some of those creative ideas. And as always, there'll be another awesome free lunch that day as well. So come check that out. We'd love to hear what you thought about today's event. That's the QR code on the right. And if you're not signed up for our newsletter that goes out every other week, sign up for that on the left as well. Again, a big thank you to our panelists. Big thank you to Gina. Thank you to you too for coming out today. We appreciate you guys and everything that you do.